So, how are organizations finding volunteers? Well, it's changed. It used to be word of mouth, but now for paid employment jobs, companies are asking this question. They have a section on the application form, or even in the interview, they'll ask about this. Tell us about your volunteer experiences, because now they value volunteerism in their people. We can recruit all we want. The question is, how do we keep them? If they're going out the back door faster than they're coming through the front door, we have a serious problem.
Sal, this is part 3 of the value of volunteers, why we need them, how to get them, how to keep them, how to train them, how to work with them. And in part 3, we're going to talk about now, we talked about what we need to be ready for them. Now, how do we actually recruit them?
Yes. And, you've heard me say flexibility multiple times. I'm going to say it again here. Jeff Brudney, who was a former mentor of mine, he said flexibility strategies broaden the nature of volunteer work to make it more convenient and often enjoyable to the volunteer. So convenient and enjoyable, two things that should be on our radar screen at all times. And that flexibility transcends into our effort to recruit these volunteers. So how are organizations finding volunteers? Well, it's changed. It used to be word of mouth, but now finding volunteer opportunities online is now the most frequent method, at least according to this study of 7,200 volunteers back in 2018. And we shouldn't be surprised. The digital divide is shrinking. Most people have access to technology, and it's a way for organizations to publish their volunteer opportunities and reach more people faster than ever before.
You know what's interesting about this, and I've only seen this phenomenon in the last 5 years or so, and I think it's because of our digital world, but in employment sites, I have seen a call for board members, right? They basically say this is an unpaid position, but we are looking for board members. So they're actually kind of advertising for these positions in places where it would be traditionally paid positions.
To your point, I'm getting these requests that you just mentioned in LinkedIn.
Yes, right.
From people who I don't know, but they're saying, we have a board opportunity, and based on your profile, would you be interested? I'm like, wow, I never got these requests before.
Yeah, yeah. I've seen them on job sites, which it was kind of interesting because, you think of job sites as being people who are looking for monetary compensation.
Right.
I guess there are some people that would say, yeah, it might be kind of fun to serve on a board,
Sure.
and especially if they like the organizations.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I really love this quote. Most people do not say no. They simply never knew you wanted them to say yes. So that's Susan Ellis's backhanded way of saying, you gotta ask. It's the same credo in fundraising, right? It's no different. If you don't ask, you've already sealed your fate, right?
Yeah, you build the relationship, but sooner or later you have to ask the question.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, you
Yes.
do. You got to pull that trigger and say, hey, we really could use you. Would you be willing to do this, The other important point about Susan's quote here, too, is I have found that more often than not, people are honored when you ask. They really appreciate that you thought of them for a certain specific role or task. Not that it's a neediness thing, but it's, hey, we have this important thing we need to take care of, and we think you're a good fit for that. So there's a sense of honor and pride in asking people sometimes. And I only say that because often we lose sight of that.
Do you find in your research and experience that when you're recruiting, sometimes it's better to start off with just a short-term commitment versus saying, we'd like you to come in and work every Tuesday, until the day you die, kind of thing. In other words, to say, we'd like you to come in and try it for a month or 2 months or 3 months and see if this is a good fit for you. Maybe it's a good fit for us, and then maybe we reevaluate. What is the evidence on that?
Yeah, I think it's a smart strategy given the busyness of today's society. It's a great way to offer opportunities for people that are on the fence, or people that are skittish, or people that may say, I'm really interested in this, but I'm really just concerned about the level of commitment with the time. That's when you could say, aha, I have an offer for you. We have these short-term assignments. And why don't you give one of these a try? And if it works well, you can keep doing that, or maybe we can look at some other opportunities. And I've seen nonprofits be very adept and skilled at doing this with corporate volunteer groups. They will invite those groups because the corporations and their employee relations folks love group activities because it, builds collegiality and harmony and skills and
Sure.
relationships among them. And it's usually convenient and it's usually accessible, or more often than not, a one-off, maybe in part of a series. A lot of times, those people have such a good experience on their own individually. They'd say, I'd like to continue volunteering here beyond this corporate event here. And they will establish a relationship and do more intense work with the organization. So, to your point, I think it's an effective strategy. And again, it demonstrates flexibility. You're not going to necessarily be rigid with a set of opportunities. You're going to think more outside that box and think about how you can get people in the door. We call that the point of entree, right? You're getting them in the door for short term. And if you build a relationship, you might get them to do other things for you.
Yeah, one of the things I advise boards on when they complain about the fact that they really struggle to get new board members, and you and I both know that there are boards out there that people have been on for 10, 15, 20 years. It's time to leave, right? But why don't they leave? Because either the board isn't willing to get new board members, or they're afraid that they won't be able to get new board members, or they don't know where to look for new board members. So one of the advisements that I give them is, look, one of the reasons boards burn out is because we put them on 4 or 5 different committees. They're
Too
on the
much.
finance committee, on the fundraising committee, they're on the special events committee, they're on, and they get tired because they got to do all these committee things outside of their board responsibilities. And my advice was, give them no more than 1 or 2 committee appointments. They are the head of that committee, or at the most 2 committees, and ask them to go outside the board and find committee members.
Yes.
If they're in charge of finance, maybe they go out and get a couple CPAs to be on their committee. And they say to these people, this is not a board commitment. You're on a committee. It's short term. We're only going to meet once every 3 months or something like that. And do that with your fundraising committee, with your, whatever. And I said that solves 2 problems. Number one, board burnout, because boards are volunteers. We forget that, but
That's
they
right.
are volunteers, and they do get burnout and they get tired, and that's why they leave. One of the reasons. And then the other thing is, it gives you a potential funnel for new board members, because now they've experienced your board. They probably sat in some board meetings. They know what you do. They know certain aspects of your organization. And again, it's a way to recruit these new board members.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that, and I think nonprofits just have to remind themselves, with the exception of the executive committee, that's the exception. But beyond that, there's nothing preventing you from doing exactly what you suggested. Go out into the community and find people to serve in the committees who are not serving in a board capacity. Nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Yeah. So where do we find volunteers? That's the question. Where are they? Do we go out and shake them out of the trees?
Obviously going to a cave, right? I don't know. Is that
Maybe he's waiting for the bats to fly out of here. I don't know. I don't know. But they're out there. They're out there. Membership organizations, businesses, high schools. Many high schools have, and I know this is an oxymoron, but they have required volunteer hours. It's kind of a funny phrase, isn't it? Where they have, high school students have to volunteer X amount of hours to local organizations to be able to graduate.
so they're voluntold. And you know what?
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I was at Notre Dame, and of course, you were at IU, and I was at Butler, and um, my experience was on the applications to college. That is one of the most important questions. Where have you volunteered? And at least at Notre Dame, I'm not sure if this is true at the other schools, but at least at Notre Dame, they weren't concerned that you volunteered for 15 different organizations. They were more interested in 1 or 2 organizations that you were deeply committed to, that you volunteered for a lot, because that gave them an idea of what your interests were.
Well, and it's yes to all that. It's gone beyond that now. For paid employment jobs, companies are asking this question. They have a section on the application form, or even in the interview, they'll ask about this. Tell us about your volunteer experiences, because now they value volunteerism in their people. It's a value orientation. So they want to know what you've done as you're thinking about working for them. Service-oriented organizations, we all know who they are. They're out there. Colleges and universities. At my university, we have a pretty strong volunteer and service program, and we have an annual Grand Valley Cares Day where they go out into the community. But they don't just do it that once a year. That's a regular thing. Houses of worship. And then, just think of other opportunities that maybe are unique and specific to your community that I haven't listed here that might be a place to find volunteers for your organization.
And, one place that's kind of funny that we ignore it, but is our service clubs.
Yeah.
And service clubs are always looking for speakers. Every single week, they have to have a speaker come in, whether it's Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions,
yes,
Optimist Club, and to go there and tell your story about your nonprofit. And, the chances are not only may you get some volunteers, but having been a member of Rotary and Kiwanis and a couple other clubs, I know that members come up and offer to make donations afterward. In fact, sometimes clubs will vote to make a donation as a club to a nonprofit. So I think speaking to service clubs is one of the best ways to get your name out there, let people know what you're doing, get volunteers, maybe potential donations. And I rarely see nonprofits talking about that as a recruiting or as a public relations strategy.
Yeah, and maybe it's a byproduct of what Robert Putnam talked about in Bowling Alone, that these service clubs are kind of hurting now. Some of them are huge.
We have a Rotary here in South Bend that is well over 200 members.
Oh, yeah.
that actually attend, and every single week. And so, yeah, some of the clubs are smaller, some of them don't. They're not around anymore, but there are a lot of them out there, and they're all committed to doing civic duty. I mean, that's really their cause.
That's the beauty of it. They're already built in. That you don't have to have that second layer of convincing people as to why this is an important thing for them to do. They're already bought into it.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Your staff can help you find volunteers. Your clients and consumers can help you find volunteers as well. So tap into the resources that are right there at your disposal. Now, how do volunteers find you? Kind of thinking in reverse. What have you done as an organization to make it clear and make people aware that you are seeking volunteers? What have you done? Is it on your website? Do you have an e-newsletter? Do you have links on other websites that take them to yours? I've seen billboards, newspapers, television, radio, direct mail, volunteer fairs, where you get to come and talk, like this image here. You get to stop and talk and ask about what they're looking for. Presentations and existing employees and volunteers. And then there are clearinghouses, online clearinghouses like Volunteer Match and United Way Volunteer Center, where you can go online and just scour through, hundreds of volunteer opportunities. So if you're a nonprofit, make sure your volunteer opportunities are listed with these online clearinghouses. Who can recruit volunteers? Well, your board, your executive director, your staff, existing volunteers, current and past clients, consumers. That's the beauty about volunteerism here. You have multiple key stakeholders that can help you with this effort. Think about what you're going to have volunteers doing. If they are going to be driving your vehicle, driving clients in your vehicle, you're going to need to do a driving record test. If they're going to be handling money, you're going to want to check their financial record. If they're going to be working with youth, that might behoove you to look at their criminal record. So think about what you have to do to clear them. If, worst case scenario, you realize it's not a good fit or something's not going to work, yes, you can reject somebody. But as I said earlier, be an ambassador for your organization. In other words, even though you're refusing them or rejecting them, make them walk away from your organization still feeling good about it. It's your brand. It's your reputation. Make it a learning experience for both you and the volunteer. If you can, make a referral. If the person is not a good fit for you, start thinking, who else can I refer this person to? And always leave the door open for other possibilities where they may consider coming back and being matched with a different opportunity with you.
Yeah, maybe their schedule doesn't match what you need at
Sure.
this particular point. Maybe they've got personal issues that suddenly came up, but maybe down the road that may not be the case. So,
Right.
yeah, don't burn any bridges for sure. Right?
No, no. Always
Yeah.
leave that door open. Training. The three major steps in developing training. First, what are the needs assessment for the position? It's another way of saying what does the person need to know? That drives learning objectives. What are the learning objectives we want to get out of this training? And the objectives, in turn, drive how we design the training. So these are the three main steps in sequential order. If you stick to these three steps, you usually will come out having designed an effective training. Some considerations. The tenets of adult education. Adults learn primarily by reflection. The great education philosopher John Dewey taught us that a long time ago. So give time for meaningful reflection. Think about the required time. This can be tricky because you want to do this little dance, this balancing act between making sure the required time is enough to get what they need, but at the same time, try to streamline your training as much as you can so you don't overburden them. And think about what technology requirements you have for the training as well.
It strikes me that the requirements for having volunteers, especially the training requirement, is so large that if you have enough volunteers, you actually need a full-time volunteer coordinator or volunteer director, because what you're talking about here has so many components to it if you want it to be successful. Because if you're just relying on a program person to do this, or maybe two or three program people, if there's no one specifically kind of on top of this, and let's face it, as an executive director, you really don't have the time. You got 13 other things going on. So having a volunteer director is good. I'm wondering, are foundations and donors open to supporting that kind of position? Because sometimes I don't think people understand the value of volunteers. And certainly then if they don't understand the value of a volunteer director or coordinator.
On rare occasions, I have seen community foundations specifically fund volunteer management positions in their grantee organizations.
Well, it seems smart. I mean, it's a huge resource,
Yep.
just like fundraising or grant proposal writing, right?
Yes.
It's not only a community resource, but it is a financial resource as well.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And a lot of
Right.
foundations believe, particularly community foundations, believe in volunteerism as a community activity, as a way of building community, as a way of building social capital amongst the residents of that community. So it's something they support. So I haven't seen it often, but it does exist. And it's nice to see that when it happens, because to your point, nonprofits can try to get by on the cheap with all the things I'm talking about today. I
Right.
think it's a mistake if you're going to give this task to someone who already has a full-time job. It's not likely going to get the time, the attention, and the love that it needs. And the person's going to feel like they're being torn in two different directions. And we've all seen how these play out. How many times do you see an administrative assistant reporting to two different directors? That never works.
Right.
We've seen this movie play out how many times, right?
Yes, right, right.
So I would just say avoid that. Avoid that entirely. Hire a full-time dedicated person and then budget for their professional development.
Right. Yeah, well, that's another thing that we don't value as much as professional development, which is one reason I'm doing this channel. Because let's face it, education, especially continuing education for nonprofits, is absolutely necessary. Things change all the time. I just did a series with Mark Germano, and we talked about the state of federal and government funding right now. Well, that's totally in flux. That may
Yeah.
change in the next 3 months, the next year, the next 5 years, but things are constantly changing. So we have to constantly have them updating their skills.
There's no question. And, you don't want to just throw someone to the wolves. You want to hire a full-time volunteer manager and say, we're going to support you. We're going to give you professional development. And in some of the larger organizations, you may be saying, and we're going to give you some support staff. We're going to give you your own administrative assistant. At the Girl Scouts, we had 13,000 adult volunteers spread across 20 counties, including
That's a
Metro
lot.
Atlanta.
That's a
So,
lot of management.
so we didn't just have a person. We had teams of people. Because in the Girl Scouts, it's sort of like role reversal. It's an interesting thing. The volunteers provide the core function. Staff are really administrative support. So it's an interesting role and responsibility dynamic. But yeah, depending on how many volunteers you have and what they're doing, you got to seriously consider at minimum a full-time person to do the work. Other training considerations, accessibility. Where's the location? Are you going to do this in person versus distance? What I would say there is, if you're going to do it distance and use technology like we're using here today for this session, just make sure that the points you want to get across to people are conducive to the online format. An easy example would be if you have to do a demonstration. You can do an online demonstration, but typically demonstrations are more effective if people are there in the room with you.
Yeah, like a first aid, for instance.
Exactly.
You want to do that in person. You can do it online, but intellectually you can get it, but you can't practice it otherwise.
No. And there's too much at stake for something as important as that, right?
It struck me as you were talking about ways to recruit. And because this is a YouTube channel, it strikes me that nonprofits starting their own YouTube channel, not so much it could be to promote their organization, but they could also use it for training.
Oh, sure.
Right? They could put videos on there, and also to attract volunteers who go, wow, that sounds like a cool place to go. Or they could refer donors to it and say, hey, here's what we're doing. And I know we've always talked, you should put videos on your website, but I have to tell you, because of the research I've done on YouTube, there's over 3 billion people every day who look at YouTube every day. And that's a global audience. It's huge. And it's free to start a channel. It really doesn't cost you anything. So it seems to me that would be something in terms of looking for volunteers and training volunteers that might be valuable.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with putting them on your website, but you've got to drive traffic to the website.
Right.
YouTube, you got to drive traffic there. But as you said, YouTube already has traffic,
Right.
And
they do their own algorithm and they push traffic to you.
Oh, yeah.
People who are interested in your area.
Yeah. And, I've got a couple of videos on YouTube, like some, shorts of my documentary, and you will be shocked and surprised. People all over the world are going to stumble upon your stuff, watch it, and comment on it. Right. And where else are you going to get that?
No, you're not. I mean, Facebook and LinkedIn are okay, but they're not really video formats.
Whereas
YouTube is. But it seems to me that it's a great resource for people who are kind of in the dark about what they really want to do, like in retirement, or if like a student has to volunteer for an organization. I know young people go to YouTube all the time. So if you're looking for young people, if you want to create a social media presence, you don't want to hire somebody like me, or you don't want to bring me in as a volunteer. You want to get somebody in high school or college who grew up with this stuff and it's second nature. They know how to build websites, and they love to do it. They love to sit on boards and do that kind of stuff. So, that's another aspect.
It's a place to get ideas. It's a place people go to, and it's a medium to be tapped into for sure. The last point here, ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, signed by President George H.W. Bush in 1990. So here we are 35 years later, and things are not still perfect. The laws are on the books. They're not always enforced, and lawyers are not waiting online to take up the lawsuits for people whose rights have been violated. So if you're a nonprofit, given all that we know about nonprofits generically speaking, you're held in the public trust. You have to be ADA compliant, and you may have some volunteers who have disabilities, and think about whether your training is accessible to them. And I'll just pause here for a second, because of all the different demographic groups, people with disabilities are the most overlooked for volunteering.
Is that partly because people undervalue them, or is it because they're afraid they have to deal with special accommodations, or what seems to be a reason for that?
Those two, and I'll add a third one, stigma.
Okay.
They create in their minds these visions of what people can and can't do, and 99% of the time they're not correct. And all you need to do really is go online and see some videos of nonprofits that serve people with disabilities. One I would recommend is Bosma Industries. They are in Indianapolis, and they serve the visually impaired. And when you see in that video what blind people can do, it'll blow your mind. Every 4 years, watch the Paralympics. You will
Right.
see disabled athletes do things that you, without a disability, can't do.
That's
Okay.
right. Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure that's the case with me. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a guy once bench press. He didn't have full use of his legs to support his body. And he bench pressed a weight over his head, sheer with arm and chest strength that I can't do. So, you see this, and then you start to stop and think, wait a minute, maybe I'm selling these people short. If you think about volunteers with disabilities, it's going to expand your volunteer core, and you're going to bring in people who, more often than not, have a tremendous sense of pride and work ethic. I just wanted to throw this in as a quick plug, now that we're talking about ADA, to consider people with disabilities when you think about who to recruit.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it helps the organization. It certainly helps them.
Yes.
Yes.
So more training considerations. I mentioned the demonstration already. If you want to do that, that's fine. You could do a role play simulation. Confirmation is important. You want to confirm. That's when you train someone to do something and then you have them show you what they've learned and that they're able to do certain things. So you're going to want to confirm that, okay, they're trained, they've demonstrated they can do these things, they're ready to go. And you want to evaluate your training too. You want to make sure the training is reaching those learning objectives in the way it's supposed to.
And we're going to talk about evaluation in another interview with you. So I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. Anything about evaluation gets my attention. Recognition. So I think I mentioned earlier that the number one motivation for paid employees is appreciation. That just escalates the value of showing appreciation to your volunteers. You may not have thought of this, but not every volunteer wants to be recognized in the same way. So again, get to know them, make it personal, customize it, honor their wishes. One volunteer may say, I don't really want to come to the annual gala or annual dinner. I don't really care for those things. I've gone to too many of them. You can send me the plaque in the mail. That's great. Other people want to go to those things. Sometimes people want to remain anonymous. So honor their wishes. The one thing that's important, though, is if there is an annual gala or dinner, that's great. But stop and think, do you want to wait a whole year before you thank someone? No.
Right.
So make recognition and expressions of appreciation regular. And back to motivation, when I talked about that earlier in part 1, align recognition with their motivation. Last, the performance evaluation. This gets overlooked too. Volunteers, I have found at least, maybe I'm different, but I have found that volunteers actually want their performance evaluated. They desperately want to know how well they do. They want to make sure they're doing a good job. And when you take the time to evaluate their performance, a lot of people don't think this way, that actually is a form of recognition. I argue it's the highest form of recognition because what you're saying is, you and what you do here is so important. We want to make sure that we know how well you're doing it and what we can do to help you improve.
Well, and it shows that you are willing to commit your time
Yeah,
to thank them in a very constructive way.
absolutely.
All right.
Very powerful. Retention. We can recruit all we want. The question is, how do we keep them? If they're going out the back door faster than they're coming through the front door, we have a serious problem. Retention actually starts with effective screening, right? We talked about that earlier. We
Right.
talked about the psychological contract and making sure we find that sweet spot that's a good match. Training actually helps with retention. If our volunteers are trained and they can do what we ask them to do, they're more likely to stay.
And that's also true for paid employees.
Yes. And, we already mentioned professional development, showing that you're willing to invest. Send them to a webinar, send them to a conference, send them to a local gathering or a workshop. And of course, recognition, which we've just covered, showing that you appreciate your people. All these things are going to help volunteers want to stay with your organization. And that's a good thing. If they're doing good work, you want them to stay. Make sure you have a welcoming culture. That's important, particularly when volunteers are from different backgrounds than you or your organization. Maybe these people are new in town.
It's interesting that you say that because When we were talking earlier, you were talking about Robert Putnam,
Hmm.
and you were talking about his book, Bowling Alone.
Yes.
And one of the things I often quote, especially when I'm talking about volunteers, is these concepts of bridging capital and bonding capital.
Yes.
Bonding social capital, bridging social capital, and the fact that bonding social capital is sort of like everybody you go to church with, or maybe people you all went to the same school, or you're in the same family, or whatever. There is a commonality there. Whereas bridging capital, which I think is where volunteerism comes in, is often bringing people from very different backgrounds together who would not have normally met
That's right.
and who are now engaging in the same activity and getting to know each other, and that is called bridging social capital, and it's something that we sorely need right now.
Yeah.
We need a lot of bridging social capital that brings people of different backgrounds together. And so volunteerism is really a civic good in that it introduces to people to each other that wouldn't normally probably even talk to each other.
Yeah, this is a fantastic point you're making, because when I think back to the various diversity or DEI trainings that I've taken over the years, some voluntarily, some mandatory,
Right.
and it's gotten much better, by the way. So I have to say that. But one of my bigger criticisms is an intense focus on recognizing and appreciating differences. And I always would ask the question, why are we not incorporating things that bring people together? Music, food, fashion, sports, and now you've added to the list volunteerism. These are things that, like you said, will bring people together that otherwise wouldn't be cohabitating with each other.
Absolutely. I come from an arts background, especially theater, but I've also been the director of a choral association and things like that. And people often ask me, well, what do we need the arts for? Isn't that just for people to go out there and, show people their talent? And I said, no, really, if you're in a theatrical show, a civic theater, for instance, where you're not getting paid, you're just there, and you've got people who are makeup people, they're costume people, they're actors, they're directors, there are production people, they're lighting people, and they're all volunteers. And they're all coming from different backgrounds. And especially now in the theater, they're doing what they call colorblind casting. So even if the story's about an all-white family, they'll cast people who are black or Hispanic or Asian or, whatever. What that does is it creates this bridging capital because these people start talking to each other and realizing, what, we're not really that different. I
That's
mean,
right.
yeah, we may have some cultural differences, but we all, love our families. People love us. We all want a job. We all want to have a decent life. I mean, there are so many commonalities, and I think it's a powerful, powerful thing to volunteer with people that you don't know and probably would never know other than that particular situation.
Absolutely. And we've seen evidence where long-lasting relationships, lifelong relationships,
Yes,
have been established through volunteerism. It can be an
absolutely.
incredibly powerful thing.
Absolutely. And I think schools do the same thing. I mean, you and I didn't know each other before the
That's right.
PhD program,
That's right.
and now we've become very good friends
That's
over
right.
this last 20 years. And
That's right.
we probably, if we saw each other on the street, we probably wouldn't gravitate toward each other because we don't know each other. And, you're from Jersey, I'm from Indiana. I mean, what the heck do we have in
That's
common,
right.
right?
That's right. Well, and think about how they're going to speak well of your organization because you were the catalyst, you were the conduit to bring them together with these other people.
Right, right.
Some other retention pieces here of support resources. Like I said, in the psychological contract, this is less forgivable. If you ask someone to do a job and then you don't give them what they need to do the job, adios. You know, they're gonna head for the door. It's so simple and basic, but you really got to think about that. Feedback loops, close the feedback loops. In other words, if you go to your volunteers and you ask them for feedback on their experience or on a new program or how things are going within the organization, take that information, discuss it with your staff and maybe other volunteers and board, decide what to do about that, and circle back to the volunteers and say, we took your idea, we discussed it. We weren't able to do this for now, maybe later, but here's how we were able to move some of these things forward. It's incredibly powerful because you're telling the volunteers they have a voice in your organization.
And what they think matters. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I already mentioned the performance evaluation. That gives them a roadmap for improvement. It also shows them that they're doing good work. That's going to help keep them as well. So this is an easy way to think about this. Now, when you think about the time expended divided between recruitment and retaining volunteers, which of these two organizations do you want to be? Obviously, you want to be the one on the bottom because it takes a lot less resources to keep the people that are already there than it does to acquire new volunteers. Let's see, true or false, volunteers can be fired.
Well, I would hope so, because not everybody works out. And I don't know how you do that because they're not really employees per se, but if they aren't following the rules of the organization, or in the example we gave of the museum docents, they have their own script, you probably have to do something about that, right?
It is true. You can fire them, and I have fired volunteers in the past. It's not pleasant. But in one case, the person wasn't following the policy, and it was a safety violation. So in that case, even if they're generally speaking a decent volunteer, a good volunteer, the price is too high. You can't sacrifice that. You want to evaluate your volunteer program. There are going to be benefits to the clients you serve, consumers you serve. They're going to be benefits to the volunteer. They're going to be benefits to the organization. And on a more macro level scale, they're going to be benefits to the community that you serve. It takes some time. It might even take some money. But if you can afford to do so, evaluate your volunteer program, because if you're the volunteer manager, this is your coming out party. This is your way of saying, here's the value proposition of my work. And here's how we're saving the organization. And here's how we're expanding our reach, enhancing our brand, and getting all those wonderful benefits.
It seems to me, too, if you evaluate and you also bring in the monetary aspect of this, how much value it brings the organization in terms of dollars, it's an easier sell to a funder or a foundation to underwrite that position.
I think so. And we see some of that here. Independent sector uses the Bureau of Labor Statistics to come up with an average. This is the 2023 average, $31.80 an hour. So you could value their time that way. You could use equivalent valuation where you ask yourself, how much would it cost to get an FTE, full-time equivalent, to come in and do this particular task? Then there's the cost effectiveness model in terms of finding the equivalent, but then, looking at your expenses and seeing what you're benefiting from that and what the surplus might be in that situation.
And I think with professional volunteers that are doing work in their field, like CPAs, lawyers, whatever, you can actually value that at what they usually charge per hour.
Oh, yeah.
As a professional. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the process evaluation, evaluate the process of how volunteers are onboarded, of how volunteers are trained, all the mini processes within the overarching process, and see how that's going. It's more of a qualitative evaluation, but it's worth doing that every couple of years. And again, as I said, there's going to be an impact on volunteers. What would that look like? New relationships, new skills, new knowledge, feeling of self-worth, a feeling of self-identity and relevance, the organization and the mission. For some of you out there, you take away the volunteers, you're not going to be able to satisfy your mission. So that's a direct impact. Impact on the consumers, the people you serve. This is especially important when your volunteers work one-on-one with them. And again, the macro level on the community. What does it mean for your community that you are engaging your volunteers? So there's impact at various different levels. And that's what I have for this topic of motivating and managing and getting the most out of your volunteers. I want to thank everyone for participating and joining us today for this discussion.
And just to remind our listeners, if you have other things you want us to talk about, or if you have questions about this, please leave a comment below, or I've got my email below. I'm also going to put, if it's all right with you, Sal, I'll put your email and your location there so they can email you if they have questions. Sal, you do consulting. And by the way, I used to bring Sal in at the University of Notre Dame to do all kinds of programs, volunteerism, evaluation, a couple other ones. So He's very good at presenting. Otherwise, I wouldn't have brought him in. But and he's very knowledgeable.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, Sal.
My
I
pleasure.
really, and by the way, congratulations on your becoming a full professor,
Thank you.
which we didn't mention really at the beginning. People that aren't in academia don't realize what an accomplishment that is, but it is. And of course, you got many other accomplishments. In fact, and you have to brag a little bit here because I didn't put this in your intro. What was the award you just got from your students? From the
Oh, yeah. So the award I just got,
You got it. You got it right
I
there.
got it here. It's the Student Academic for Faculty Excellence Award. So that was kind of nice.
There you go. And that's just one more reason why he's on the channel, other than the fact that he's a man of great integrity and a good friend.
Thank
So
you.
well, thanks a lot, Sal. And we'll be interviewing again and talking about other things in the nonprofit sector. But I really appreciate your hard work and your PowerPoint and all the information you shared with us.
My pleasure. Glad to be here. Thank you, Mark.
All right. Take care.